Hello, everyone. Welcome to another meeting of the Planning and Development Committee of Wednesday, July 10th, special meeting. I believe all members of committee are here except one, who I think might just be out of the room, but and the mayor is the mayor is not required at this meeting. Declarations of interest under the Municipal Act, Conflict of Interest Act. Are there any declarations of conflict? No. We go on to the consent agenda. So, Councillor Fortini.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I'd like to put 4.3 into consent. I also like to pull out 7.3 out of consent since there's delegations. We have to pull that one out.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Fortini has 4.3 he wants put in consent?
Yes, it's just a cleanup thing there for 3 years.
It's a statutory public meeting, so you can't.
Oh, there's a public meeting on that one?
Yeah.
Oh,
We will go, so,
they told me no.
so anyways, so he's pulled out
Okay.
7.3.
I'll pull out 7.3. Thank you.
Okay. So, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes moved by Councillor Palashi? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So this is where we come, before we go to our statutory public meeting report, I would suggest that 7:21 would members of the committee be amenable that we reconvene at 7:45? Okay, so can I get do I need a motion? Okay, to the public, and we apologize. We've had as this is the last council agenda, previously was our last council meeting of the year, and we've gone consecutively with a half-hour break for lunch, and we've gone consecutively up to the time of planning. So we're just allow 15 to 20 minutes for members of committee to recompose themselves, to also get a little bite, and we will be back to reconvene and start at 7:45. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, and apologies again for those who are in attendance and have waited patiently. We now go on to statutory public meeting reports. Is there anyone in the audience here to deal with the city-initiated amendments to zoning bylaw, proposal to amend the zoning permissions with special policy area 16 in Ward 10? No. Oh, wait. Oh, Sylvia, okay. Are there anyone in the audience for item 4.2, which is the city-initiated amendments to the Central Area Community Improvement Plan? Is there anyone here? Okay, no. 4.3 is put into, 4.3. So this is regarding zoning bylaw to permit the existing outdoor storage of motor vehicles for a temporary period of 3 years. Is there anyone here? No. Okay. So 4.2. Okay, so we'll go on to item 4.1 and ask our staff person to come forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, we're just trying to bring up the presentation and I can't see it on my screen. It's not popping up.
Okay, we're just having some technical difficulties. Do we want to start with that? Do I click here? Do I click on this or how am I gonna click?
Mr. Chair, we'll run it off my computer. That's on my computer.
Okay.
Yep, that's the one.
Okay, just let me know when you want to switch.
Sure. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Good evening. My name is Bashar Al-Husseini, and I'm the planner assigned to this city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of this meeting is to provide information to the public and obtain feedback on a city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment. Working? Okay. So the subject site is in Ward 8, actually, instead of Ward 10. That was a typo. That's been corrected since. It's in the eastern part of Brampton, and it covers the properties with the municipal addresses of 4515, 4525, 4535, and 4555 Ebenezer Road, as well as 90, 98, 100, and 150 Nexus Avenue, sorry. It's on the southeast corner of the Gore Road and Ebenezer, and there's part of it also on the southwest corner of Ebenezer and Nexus. So the city-initiated zoning bylaw is intended to harmonize the existing zoning with the uses already permitted in the secondary plan in order to reflect and best utilize the site. The uses that are being proposed are already existing on the site as well, so this is just to bring the zoning bylaw in line with the other policy documents that apply to the site. The secondary plan permits a range of non-industrial uses in addition to those by the existing zoning. So basically, the intent is to expand the zoning uses to comply with the secondary plan permitted uses. And this is also in line with council resolution to initiate this zoning bylaw amendment that was put forth earlier. Just to give some context, the current official plan designation for the site is business corridor, and that permits a broad range of employment uses as well as business, service, and institutional uses to serve the general public and the adjacent employment uses. And then as we go to the secondary plan designation, which provides a bit more detail, the site is currently under the BRAMI Secondary Plan Area 41. It's subject to Special Policy Area 16, which expands the current mixed commercial industrial uses for the site, allowing office, financial institutions, commercial schools, animal hospital, grocery store, private school, as well as health and fitness center. So the current zoning for the site falls under bylaw 207, 2004. Which is M4 1669 zoning. And the current zoning currently permits prestige industrial, which includes a range of uses such as manufacturing, packaging, warehousing, printing. It also allows for a limited range of commercial uses such as office, limited office, daycare, restaurant, hotel, motel, banquet hall, community club, etc. What the city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment proposes is to expand on these non-industrial uses, as mentioned, to align with the existing permitted uses under the secondary plan. And what that means is basically permitting office uses that are unrestricted, financial institutions, commercial schools, health and fitness center, grocery store, and private schools. The grocery store is limited to 10,000 square feet as per the special policy area under the secondary plan. And we feel that the city-initiated zoning bylaw amendment is necessary, again, to harmonize the existing zoning with the existing zoning and to reflect the existing development on the sites. So, hopefully through this meeting, we expect to receive feedback from the public, and we will then be preparing a recommendations report incorporating the feedback and addressing the issues that are brought forth today. We will assess the comments, and we hope to have the recommendations report by the fall of this year. The application conforms to the official plan and secondary plan, as well as all provincial and regional legislation, and the zoning change proposed, again, is in line with these policy documents, and we intend to expand these uses to provide detailed property regulations, creating a framework that reflects the existing development. So my name is up there if there are any other specific concerns or questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has on the specific city-initiated bylaw amendment.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder to members of committee and to those in the audience, as this is a statutory public meeting, we do not, or members of committee cannot express their support or opposition to. Merely they can ask questions of clarification. If there's any people that would like to delegate, please come forward, sign in with staff, state your name for public record. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Sylvia Roberts. So my thoughts on this are, it's zone prestige industrial. It's mostly used for commercial. It's surrounded by residential. Associated with an industrial use, you can have a daycare up to 15%. So I guess if you have large industrial use, you can have a daycare for your employees. Makes perfect sense. It's not the kind of gritty industrial that you wouldn't want kids near. The thing is, you can't actually build a daycare, just a regular daycare by itself. We have a relatively new area of the city. It's surrounded by single-family homes. The population is going to have lots of children. And Brampton is one of the worst child care deserts in the country. We have some of the least access to child care. It's my request is that for this, while the city is adding a bunch of permissions, to look at potentially adding permissions for a daycare. You're adding banks, fitness centers, maybe parents, when they want to go to a gym that's there, they can drop their child off in daycare, or when they're going to work. There's a daycare there. We don't have access to daycares here. People move to Brampton because they can buy a house to raise their kids, and yet we fail at some of the most basic things for providing for families. So for this, and then when the city is also looking at other cases where the city is going to initiate zoning changes for what's going to be allowed, if you have a site that's mostly commercial and by residential, we really should be looking at adding daycares to that. That's all I have to say on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of committee, are there any questions? No. Can I get a motion to receive the presentation, staff presentation, and receive the delegation? And approve staff report. Moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. There's no speakers for 4.2, 4.3. We go on now to item 6.1, presentation by Mr. Bobby Gauthier, WSP Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study.
Through you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair. So 6.1 would be the next item on the published agenda, but there were added delegations for this evening. There was a delegation 5.1 regarding staff report 7.1, the city-initiated amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw for Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study, and then there were 3 delegations identified as 5.2 for item 7.2 on tonight's agenda.
Okay, so we'll move on to the delegations for the first item, 7.1. So I believe that's Mr. Chris Drew. If you would like to come forward. And this, again, item 7.1 is regarding the city-initiated amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study, wards 1 and 3. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Brampton Council. My name is Chris Drew, and I'm happy to speak in favor of the Queen Street Corridor Land Use Study and offer my personal opinion, which I'll detail further in a moment. Before I do that, I want to let you know that I don't work for any entity that has an existing or pending development application on Queen Street, any landowner on Queen Street. I don't own land on Queen Street or work for any potential transit project on Queen Street, and I don't receive any funding to advocate for transit on Queen Street. I just enjoy being an active citizen. If this changes in the future, I'll disclose it if there's a future deputation. So I was very excited to see this study in your agenda package, and I want to come here also to check out the renovated council chamber, as it's been a couple of years since my last deputation. It's great to be able to watch the live stream and not see the bright glare behind deputants when we watch online. So while I was growing up in near Williams Parkway and Bramalea Road, with my dad working across the street at St. Paul's United Church, I would often cycle from my home to visit my dad, and there were 2 options, Williams Parkway or Queen Street. So if I wanted the more suburban, scenic trip, I would take Williams Parkway. If I wanted to have a more urban trip with something to eat or drink, I would take Queen Street. And I know that I was really blessed to have parents that gave me that freedom and flexibility to cycle so far away from home. I know many of you are parents or soon-to-be parents, and I know that keeping your children safe is your top priority. So overall, Queen Street has changed little since I was young, other than there's an additional lane for car drivers. There's many, many driveway cuts that make it very challenging for anyone who's walking or cycling, and that's due to the number of turning cars. The patterns of the buildings, the heights, the types of uses, the range of uses on Queen Street has basically not changed, other than about 3 condo developments. In short, Queen Street from my youth is basically the same as it is now, and could be any other wide suburban street primarily focused on moving cars. And that's not to disparage anyone who drives. I drive, and it's one of my choices. It's just to say that we need more choices. So this Queen Street study provides an excellent glimpse into the future. Transforming Queen Street has the opportunity to diversify the housing supply for young professionals like me or my parents who need non-stair residential choices in Brampton, and we need more of that. Speaking of my parents, they live in Councillor Fortini and Councillor Williams' wards, and I ran this deputation by them and they fully support it. My brother is a chef, he also lives with them, and he wants to see more food options on Queen Street. So this study is another important step of transforming Queen Street, and I'm confident you'll keep the momentum going to transform Queen Street. And I think I'm over my time because it's 5 minutes.
We'll move more.
Oh, well, thank you, Councillor Dillon. That's very much appreciative because I'm going to be mentioning you in a moment. So speaking of Queen Street, I'm also very passionate about transit, as some of you may know. So one of the reasons I support this study is because transforming Queen Street can only help the case for higher order rapid transit in the future. It's critically needed as part of a broad network. That includes future rapid transit on Main Street, the Kitchener GO train line, the future airport Zoom line, and many other north-south routes in Brampton. There's an image in this study, 6.1, page 7, that shows a BRT in a dedicated lane on Queen Street. The faster the City of Brampton gets this stretch of Queen Street transformed, the faster, I believe, it will assist with the Brampton East portion of Queen Street. I know that Councillors Dillon and Councillor Singh often hear from their East Side residents about the quality of transit service east of the study area. Many residents in Brampton East are growing very tired of waiting on buses, stuck in traffic, because they have no dedicated space. I have personal experience with this because I've used this bus many times from the airport and Queen Street area, particularly when I was shopping with my now wife and in-laws for my Curta. We all know that better is possible, and we can't settle for the status quo on Queen Street. I know that Councillors Dillon and Singh are strong advocates for the Queen Street bus rapid transit proposal that's currently being studied so that council can obtain funding. While this study involves transforming one portion of Queen Street, the impact can be to assist the business case with the entire transit route on Queen Street, including Brampton East, and that will benefit the entire city, not just the properties along Queen Street. In closing, the youthful Chris Drew, who went on to study urban and regional planning at Ryerson University, would have been thrilled to see the launch of this study and the associated transit and active transportation benefits. So I support council continuing the momentum for change on Queen Street and for all of Brampton. Thanks so much for the additional time.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the delegation? No. Okay, as I see, then I will invite staff or a presentation by Mr. Bobby Gauthier. Yes, please.
Okay.
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee, and good evening, members of the public. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Bobby Gauthier, as noted. I'm with WSP, and we're the consulting firm that the city retained to complete this study. So really the purpose of the presentation is to provide a bit of an update on the status of the study, as well as present some of the work that we've conducted to date, as well as some of our draft recommendations. There we go, thank you. So I think just a little bit of context around this study. The first point to be made is that, of course, the Queen Street corridor is planned for transformation. It's supposed to transform from, principally auto-oriented, low-rise commercial area into a high-density, mixed-use, vibrant pedestrian and transit corridor. However, in spite of that vision, the zoning currently permits low-rise commercial uses. And that, of course, represents a risk. It could inhibit the achievement of this very ambitious vision for this corridor. So ultimately, the purpose of the study is to review and update the existing zoning to bring it a bit more into alignment with the policies. So the study area basically extends between Etobicoke Creek and Highway 410 across this corridor, encompassing some of the lands that front onto Queen Street. Some of the background that I think is pertinent to explain is that, of course, an interim control bylaw was passed by the city in 2017 to protect this area from development that would inhibit the future vision of this corridor from being achieved. So, of course, the city retained us to complete this study and make those updates to the zoning to implement the intent of that interim control bylaw. Thank you. There we go. So in terms of the process for completing the study, it's been ongoing for about a bit over a year and a half or so. The interim control bylaw was enacted in late 2017. We conducted some background review, and we had an initial public open house about a year ago in which we presented the purpose of the study. We presented some options for updating the zoning to the public at that time. We've been doing a whole bunch of work since then. We've advanced our recommendations, which are still draft in nature. We had an open house just about a month ago, and we're here to provide an update to this committee and to the public as well today. The intent after today's meeting is to finalize the documents, bring it forward for a formal opportunity for consultation at a statutory public meeting, and then, of course, bring it forward for adoption a bit later in the fall. Thank you. So in terms of the existing policy context, the study area is, of course, subject to the Queen Street Corridor Secondary Plan, and for the most part, it's designated central area mixed use. This designation intends for a mix of uses, a minimum of 4 stories in the official plan. There's a wide range of other requirements related to floor space, index, and density. I'd also note that there is some policies that speak to the notion that low-rise commercial development is permitted in the interim. So there's this idea in this secondary plan that these uses could be permitted, at least on a temporary basis, with the anticipated idea that this area would transform in the future. So some of the recent and ongoing studies that have been taking place that I think are relevant to this study, first is the Brampton 2040 vision for Queens Boulevard, which I think essentially affirmed the idea that this corridor is intended to be this mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented community. The other study to note is that the city will need to complete some major transit station area studies in which the city will need to refine the built form requirements in the future to respond to provincial policy requirements around major transit station areas in conjunction with looking at bus rapid transit on this corridor. The city's also, which I'm also involved in, undertaking a zoning bylaw review, and there is consideration being made to implement a development permit system in other areas of the city. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's ongoing. And I think the point I wanted to make with this slide is that the built form requirements for this area could change in the short term. The existing zoning is principally highway commercial and service commercial. So these are zones that are highly automobile-oriented zones. There's large minimum setbacks. There are no built form requirements that speak to the vision for this corridor. You know, they speak to things like maximum building height rather than minimum building height, and it permits only commercial uses. Of course, that zoning reflects what you see now in the corridor. The zoning was previously updated to remove certain uses, automotive service uses in particular. However, I think ultimately there still is that conflict between the zoning and the policy. Some other considerations that I think should be made. First is that there have been some mixed-use developments occurring in the corridor. So the transformation of the corridor, I don't think is totally hypothetical or pie in the sky. It's something that is taking place. You know, we also took a look at building permit data. And one thing that we noticed is that existing businesses continue to operate their business and they continue to invest in their property. There are changes of tenants that have been occurring in the existing plazas. And so I think there's a pretty clear signal that these businesses probably will be, they will remain for the foreseeable future, certainly. So I think, that kind of leads to the last point, which that I think the corridor will be over the long term. The transition of the corridor will be over the long term. It'll be gradual. It is a very large corridor with many very large sites that could theoretically accommodate a very large population. So I think it'll take quite a while to see that transformation be completed. So some of the overall conclusions we reached. The first is, we considered this idea of pre-zoning. What if we just applied the requirements of the secondary plan directly in the zoning and just enabled that development to occur as of right? We reached the conclusion, we thought that that was premature because the city is undertaking a whole bunch of studies currently, like the major transit station area study. We believe that the city will be updating the built form requirements in the near future. And so pre-zoning at this point is a little bit premature pending completion of those ongoing studies. We rather recommend what we call a transitional framework. So a framework that, number one, supports mixed-use development as a priority, but also balances the needs of existing businesses, allows them to continue, and provides them with opportunity to expand and for tenants to change. In terms of our proposed zoning bylaw amendment, we're essentially recommending rezoning our study area to the new Queen Street mixed-use transition zone, and there are certain sites we're recommending changing to a future development zone. Those are sites that are vacant, single-attached dwellings, as well as industrial uses, the kinds of uses that are not currently in conformity with the permitted uses of the secondary plan. So in terms of what the zoning looks like, so anything you see in yellow is proposed to be changed to the new QMUT zone, and those select sites are proposed to be changed to the FD zone that you see in the teal color. And then in terms of what those zone changes mean, the QMUT zone is effectively intended to allow commercial uses to continue and also to give them some permission to expand. So there's a range of commercial uses permitted, which allows tenants to change over time. So if an existing restaurant wants to change to a retail use, that can occur under this existing zoning, or under this proposed zoning. We're also giving some permission to expand ground floor area by up to 10%. That allows reconstruction to take place. It allows for reconfiguration of the site over time. The future development zone is a bit more restrictive. It permits existing uses, buildings, and structures, but any kind of development or expansion requires a planning application to occur. And that's because these uses don't conform to to the permitted uses of the secondary plan. Just about done. The proposed secondary plan amendment that we put forward, the first aspect of this amendment is that the priority is still on encouraging higher density mixed-use development. But we're trying to be a bit realistic. We think that there's a real possibility that the city is going to receive applications to reconstruct existing commercial plazas. I think that's a real possibility. That has occurred in some cases. So there was one fast food service restaurant that was simply reconstructed in the corridor. And I think that could continue in the future. So we think there's a need to have some policies to guide those kinds of applications as may come forward. And the policies include some principles to evaluate those kinds of applications. The first is that there's a need to prioritize the Queen Street frontage. So the lands directly adjacent to Queen Street need to be prioritized for active uses and multi-story buildings. There's a need to ensure the provision of a long-term road network because the secondary plan does intend for new roads to be constructed and for this area to become more permeable over time. There are policies around phasing of large sites. Some of these sites are very large. They could accommodate a lot of development. And there are policies that speak to this idea that effectively any development applications can be very case by case. Every site's going to be unique. It's going to depend on what the developer wants to do. And there's a need for the city to work with the developer on that application. So some conclusions to wrap it up. The main conclusion, of course, is that the zoning is not in conformity with the policy, and we feel there's a need to update that zoning and introduce some policies. Our recommended transitional approach, as I said, it balances the needs of existing businesses while also ensuring that we're supporting that long-term vision for the corridor. I would also kind of make the last point that I think what we're proposing here is interim. This is not a long-term solution. I view this as being sort of a fix to the zoning as you see it now. And when the city does advance some of its policy initiatives, like the major transit station areas work, and starts to refine the built form expectations for this area, I think there's going to be a need to revisit the zoning again in the future and implement those recommendations. Or perhaps that occurs through a future development permit system expansion. So in terms of additional information, everything's posted on the website or via the city's agendas website, and Michelle Gervais at the city is the contact person for the study. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I believe Councillor Vicente has a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the proposed timelines for the completion of this study, that would be this fall?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Absolutely, yeah. We're looking to have the statutory public meeting likely in September and then proceed for council adoption shortly after that.
So before the end of this year, we would have new bylaws in place then for this area, this zone?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. As part of the review, your work, what is your vision in terms of parking requirements for proposed developments along the corridor?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It's a really good point, and I think it's something we might want to take away and think about a bit more. Currently, in our proposed zoning bylaw amendment, we're not proposing to change the parking requirements. The parking requirements would still remain the same, so they'd be subject to the overall comprehensive bylaw, which has minimum parking requirements based on permitted uses. It's something that we could think about a bit more. Ultimately also, if a developer comes forward with a significant development proposal, including a mix of uses and residential uses, they would have to go through a zoning bylaw amendment, which I think would be an opportunity to look at their parking requirements on a site-by-site basis.
Do you think that the city should consider eliminating the parking minimums?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's a good question. I think it's also a question that we're looking at as part of the zoning bylaw review as well, which is a separate study that I'm also involved in. So I do think that we are considering that citywide, including this corridor. But I think for the purposes of this study, this is about kind of addressing that particular inconsistency between the policy and the zoning. So it's not really focused on the parking, But I think parking is something we'll be looking at as part of the overall zoning bylaw review, like comprehensively across the city.
Okay, good, because I think in particular, this corridor is, you know, not having a parking minimum is something that we definitely should potentially consider. And so that's why I asked that question, because it makes sense with transit being available along the entire length of it. When I look at page 6.1-6, which has there's another, that map works as well, if you just want to scroll back down. I know from traveling to other cities in the world and across this country, particularly out in BC, large development properties tend to have access from multiple streets. So in the case where you have on that, let's just say the northeast portion that goes along Arch Street, would developers have the opportunity, would they be encouraged to potentially consider having access to the road behind Queen Street or to the north of Queen Street, which would facilitate in and out, access to the property?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. And actually, the secondary plan already has a policy framework that speaks to that. And it talks about this idea of having rear laneways as well as new roads that can kind of permeate through these large sites. So I think it would absolutely be the city's intent to see additional roads, like even in the example you're providing, to kind of take some of the access off of Queen Street in particular. That's something the city could protect for and provide for through the site plan control process.
So through you, Mr. Chair, will that be then codified within the new proposed zoning?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it wouldn't be implemented directly in the zoning, but it would be in the policies of the secondary plan and also implemented through the site plan control process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vicente. As I see there's no further questions, can I get a mover of the presentation and receipt of the delegation? Moved by Councillor Fortini. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Now, believe we have delegations regarding item 7.2. And that is Mr. Gagnon and Denardis.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. We need to access your overhead with our presentation that was submitted previously.
That's fine. Do you want to add them?
The computer overhead, I meant. My apologies.
Sorry, the
Mr.
computer's not an overhead. So do you need the overhead or the computer?
The computer, pardon me.
Has the presentation been submitted? Yes.
Yes, it was sent in last week, and we made sure, in accordance with the request, not to send any more paper in because of the climate emergency we're facing. It was Councillor Bowman's office who suggested that, so we're just carrying around one copy and holding it up. But I'm having trouble seeing by this. Is this, I can pull that down? Or the other way, perhaps? Sure. Leave that. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So moved by Councillor Williams. All in favor? Carried. Please, yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. It's Michael Gagnon with GWD. I'm here with Mark Denardis, one of my senior associates. I'm also joined this evening by Sunit Tooley. Perhaps, Sunit, you can just raise your hand. There he is, Sunit and his family, as well as a number of other residents from Fitzpatrick Drive, Julian Drive, and Princess Andrea Court. And maybe you could all just raise your hands. So they're scattered all on this side here, and I know that Colin Chung's over here representing the applicant. And we've sort of got this set up like a courtroom, as it were, but we're good friends with everybody. But we're here this evening in connection with 9874 the Gore Road. You can see the property outlined in red at Fitzpatrick and the Gore Road. It's right on the border of an established estate residential community. And as I mentioned while we were waiting to get the computer up and running, we had previously submitted 2 years ago when we made our first comments on this, and then about 10 days ago, a very robust planning report that included, this was filed in May of 2017, a 25-page report where we looked at all of the applicable policies in the proposal and dozens upon dozens of pages of extracts from the governing planning documents, and it outlined what our concerns were. I'm not going to dwell on the content of that material because it's been submitted, your staff have it as well. But what I would like to do is if we can go to slide number 3. And what you have here in green, purple, and blue are all of the residents within the estate lot neighborhood who have expressed concerns with the proposal at the Gore Road, and who have essentially expressed to our office their concerns and objections with this commercial proposal. They've also, some of them have been in contact with our office, others have signed petitions that are on file with the municipality. So I think it's safe to say this isn't a situation where there's one or two people in the neighborhood who are concerned, but there is a broad sort of unified neighborhood concerns and objections regarding this change in land use. Normally, at this point, I would start to dwell on some of the concerns that we had previously raised, as I mentioned. But when we got the staff report that's before you this evening, I was a little surprised by the content of it because of the extensive comments that had been made. And so we're going to diverge a little bit from this presentation. And whereas I would normally, go through slides 4 and 5, which are looking at the subject site and the site plan, and then the chronology of events. On the next slide, Mark. I'm not going to dwell on that. You have all received this presentation as well. Slide 7, slide 8, and slide 9 are all sort of summarizing information that is in our previous submission and the staff report. Suffice to say that all of those policies speak to the neighborhood, this estate lot residential neighborhood, the uses that are permitted, and if you were to drive through this neighborhood, I think you would be quite impressed by the quality of this estate residential community, the pride of ownership, and how stable this particular estate lot area is. What I do want to focus on is the slide, one of the slides that you have here, slide 10. So if you look at the top slide, what we have there is we are looking west towards the subject site where this commercial development is going to be built. And the trees that you see in the background are trees that are on both the subject site and across the property line on Sunit Tooley's property. And Sunit lives at number 10 Fitzpatrick. He's going to be speaking this evening as well. So there is a row of mature trees along that property line. And one of the things that sort of struck me when I went through the report, and you look at the site plan, is that they're proposing, and the site plan in the document doesn't include a landscape plan that identifies existing vegetation, but they're saying there'll be a landscape strip along that edge, and then there'll be parking in a driving aisle and some snow storage. The challenge is, though, and we've been through this, and I think Councillor Bowman is quite familiar with it down on Clarence, when we had an application on a mature site, we spent literally probably $30,000 or $40,000 between hiring 3 arborists, and the city even hired an arborist, to study the trees, plot their location on our client's property on a neighbor who had raised concerns. Then we had to plot the canopies, and then a drip line, and then a setback from that. It cost us units, but it was the right thing to do. The concern we have here, so the first issue for tonight is, how is that row of mature vegetation going to be addressed? And once you apply the standard sort of requirements, how much of the site will be left for the parking and the driving aisle and the proposed buildings? That's the first one. The second one, and we're going to leave this slide up, when you read the original report from several years ago, the conditions of approval, and this is issue 2, said that there's going to be a masonry wall all the way along the west property line from the left side of that top photograph all the way to the right side, a very long masonry wall. The condition from the council was there will be a masonry wall. When you read the report that is before you this evening, the conditions of approval are now that there may be a masonry wall. Well, there's a huge difference between there will be, as directed by council, and there may be. And this is a concern to our client as well, because when you couple the trees that we've identified, and then the question of how, if this project is approved, you're going to buffer my client's home in the neighborhood from this proposed development, is it going to be a wood fence or masonry? Big difference in cost, big difference in quality as well. And I don't recall this being addressed in the staff report as to why the change. Now, the next issue I'd like to look at are those community mailboxes where the little hand is there. It's almost as if it's reaching for a piece of mail. These mailboxes are used every day. The residents are coming here. This is where they stop, and you can see there's sort of like a cleared area where you park your car and you go get your mail or you drop off your mail. But this second picture at the bottom, that's the Fitzpatrick frontage, and that is where the right-in driveway to the commercial development and the left-out only driveway with this sort of an exotic pork chop or kidney-shaped island is going to be built, and that's going to control how the cars go in and come out of this development. I don't know what the city's going to do with the community mailboxes, but nobody likes to have them in front of their house. But there's one thing. They're in front of a vacant lot now, which is quite large. As you can see, it looks like a football field. And if a home was built there, you could work with the homeowner who's planning that home to figure out where the community mailboxes are going to go. I suspect that if this commercial development goes ahead with the driveways that are proposed to get in and out of it, and if there's a daycare, there'll be a lot of parents coming out with their kids, and if it's an office, likewise, at the beginning of the day and end of the day, somebody in this neighborhood is going to end up probably with these mailboxes in front of their home. And that is a concern that we have as well. And that's a general concern to this mailbox facility. The fourth issue I'd like to talk about is on slide 11. And this, the top photograph is a place of worship, which is just north of the school that you see, Castlemore Public School. Castlemore Public School is the immediate neighbor to the north of the subject site, and then the place of worship is beside it. One of the things that struck me as odd in the report before you tonight is that staff were saying, you know, having a residential lot, which is what's the existing site is proposed to be developed for, beside a school and a place of worship isn't necessarily a good thing. That's not a very compatible sort of land use, to paraphrase the report. Like, I must be missing something here. Schools, places of worship, are actually the sorts of things you like to have in residential neighborhoods because they're serving the people who live in those communities. They are typical uses you see beside residential lots. They're the sort of neighbors residents like to have. Their kids can get to school conveniently. You can go and pray at the place of worship. You can use the sports fields when school's out. So that was an argument that was put forward. And if I'm not mistaken, if we were to drive all over Brampton, you'd see a lot of schools and places of worship beside houses. That's really where they ought to be. And that's where they traditionally are in well-planned neighborhoods. Slide number 12. Mark, yeah. This is a really interesting slide because one of the issues in the report says, well, where the subject site is located at the Gore Road and Fitzpatrick is not a good place to have a house because the lot abuts the Gore Road, which is an arterial road. And that's a busy road to be on. Now, Saneet, when he makes his presentation, has done a little extra work in preparation. He's going to show you something that shows all of the incidences of where you have houses adjacent to arterial roads. They're everywhere. Dare I say they're even across the street from the subject site, because it's the whole other side of the street is all residential on the Gore. These particular houses that are at number 1 and number 2 Julian Drive. Julian Drive intersects with Castlemore, which is also a major arterial road, no different than the Gore Road. This is the other entrance into this executive neighborhood. These houses are worth over $1.5 million. Some of the houses in this neighborhood are over $2 million. And this is a demonstration of a lot that is adjacent to an arterial road that is beautifully landscaped, has fencing, there's pride of ownership in how these properties are being kept up, and because they're estate lots, there's no problem in creating a nice oasis and setting for your house in a juxtaposition with an arterial road. So I think that that is not an atypical situation, and certainly isn't a reason to suggest that we have to redesignate and redevelop the subject site for commercial. The next slide, Mark. Now, because we have other speakers tonight, including Sunit, on page 13 of our submission, we have listed sort of the general concerns we have, an increase in traffic, on-street parking conflicts. You'll have to remember that Fitzpatrick, Julian, and Princess Andrea Court are a rural cross-section. There are no sidewalks there. People are parking their cars there on the side of the road. Kids are walking to the school across Fitzpatrick and up the Gore Road. So there is concerns about that. I talked about the mailboxes as well. We're concerned about the design of the access driveway onto Fitzpatrick. I mentioned it's a right in and a left out with this pork chop arrangement to try and discourage left turns into the neighborhood. We're concerned about the incompatibility of the commercial establishment with the estate lot homes. We're concerned about the land use precedent this will set. As you know, immediately across the street on the southwest corner, there's a vacant lot. I can just imagine the similar arguments being made here tonight for commercial to be applied across the street. So now we'll have 2 commercial developments at the gateway into this executive community, adjacent to and in view of Sunit's home, Sunit Tooley's home. And we've got this conflict of, I've got there the conflict and the role of function of Fitzpatrick as a local road, and we quite frankly think that there are better places for commercial. Right in the neighborhood, if you just go to Castlemore and the Gore Road, 3 of the corners are either built or designated for commercial. And I think Sunit's going to put a little bit of information up about how many daycares there are and how many other commercial centers there are. I'm not certain we need another one at this location. I'm not certain it's the best one. Now, the next few slides, Mark's just going to run through them. I don't think you want to hear about planning policy. It's all in the record. I won't bore you with that. I think suffice to say, our submissions have been clear. We know that we were retained at the end of your previous review of this matter. Regardless, the process isn't over until it's over. We would ask that you seriously consider refusing this application. We don't think it's good planning. We think it sets a very dangerous precedent for the property across the street. And clearly, from those who have signed the petition, the residents who are here tonight, they don't want this particular project in this location. So apart from the planning reasons, which I think are all sound, I think there's also the reasons that the neighborhood isn't inviting this project to be built on this location. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councilor Fortini, do you have questions of the delegation or? Okay, so thank you very much. So if the next delegation can please come forward, state your name for public record. I believe, have you signed in, sir?
I'm not sure.
Oh, he's listed? Okay. Please come forward and just state your name, please.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to come and present myself. My name is Dr. Sunit Singh Tooley, and I'm a resident of 10 Fitzpatrick, and that's the property right next to the subject property. Okay. How do I I move this forward. And thank you for having the energy to bear through this at this at this late stage. My wife was saying that generally at the end of the party is when us Canadians do fireworks. So I hope that's not a metaphor on the next little while. There's a number of objections the neighborhood has with regards to this. And the first, very simple, is that this estate neighborhood does not support this. We had a petition the last time this came up from people that are not in the ward and that are not part of this neighborhood. The question is, what is the voice of this neighborhood? And the voice of this neighborhood is that this rezoning should not go through. Second is, in how this has been done, there is serious concern about the integrity and the judgment of both the applicant and, to be frank, the planning department over this period of time. We submitted, it is rare for residents to hire consultants and prepare reports. We did that. We took this and took a very professional approach to this and paid money from pocket. We just didn't show up. We paid money from pocket to have a professional come in and guide us on this process, who submitted a very expansive report 2 years ago. And we were not given the opportunity to meet with the department until very recently, after new Commissioner of Planning Services came on board. And we think that that's disingenuous to the residents. The third issue we have is that the justification that we've been provided, that this is not conducive, this lot is not conducive to a residential dwelling, is flawed. On Gore Road, within a 3-kilometer span, you have 100 additional dwellings with the exact same criteria as this one. We raised safety concerns the last time we were here. The Peel School Board raised safety concerns, and none of those have been addressed. And instead, the requirements that council put in front of this applicant the last time around was to update studies so that they're relevant if this is going to move forward. And this application at this stage primarily says that the old studies were either sufficient or we'll decide it during site plan approval, you council shouldn't bother with it, which I think, at least if I was a council member, would be insulting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading each line on each slide, but the majority of the neighborhood objects to this. This kind of spot zoning isn't supported in law or precedent, and I assure you that this neighborhood will, if we lose tonight, we will continue pursuing this forward. This next 2 or 3 slides may be irrelevant, but it shows the pattern of misinformation. We've been given a narrative that it's a vacant lot, it's an empty lot, it's an empty dwelling, which is not the case. These are all 2.5-acre lots. The residence is on one side of the lot, and the rest of the lot seems empty to you. So does mine. Doesn't mean my lot's empty. Neither are the dozens of other homes that are up there. Certainly, Google Maps and Street Views over the years show cars and garbage bins and so on, and I assure you that it's not a vacant dwelling. On 7.2, page 31, we're told that it was identified that the sign was dislocated due to bad weather conditions. The signage was reinstalled by the owner after being notified. The signage was reinstalled after I made queries from our council members. Is this application been abandoned because for 2 years we've not seen anything, and the signs have been down for 2 years? And instead of saying that the signs have been down for 2 years, the planning department has told you that it was identified that the sign was dislocated due to bad weather conditions. Well, these are Google Street Map views. The 2014 Street Map view shows no sign. The 2018, September 2018 Street Map view shows no sign. 2016, July, no sign. And again, September 2018, no sign. In that period of time, others have bought into this estate neighborhood. And one of my friends, Avneep Singh, who's bought a property in this neighborhood, unfortunately couldn't make it today, but is livid that he wasn't aware that when he made a multi-million-dollar investment into this neighborhood, that the perimeter of the neighborhood was going to be changed to commercial zoning. He says, I wouldn't have paid as much. Is the city going to be responsible for that lack of public transparency? There is a serious issue with regards to the financial viability of this matter. The property as it resides today is worth more than the money that can be made from the kind of and the level of construction that's being authorized. And when confronted with this issue, the applicant has told me this is the start. That this is the first step. Amendments are easier to get done later on. This is the reality of what happens here. Let's get it through. Once we've got it past council, it'll be easier. Right now, with the amount of square footage that's there and the selling price for that and the cost of building and having to go through us neighbors going through litigation for the next few years, the earnings on this are significantly less than if it was sold today as a residential dwelling. So council's got to make a decision realizing the Pandora's box that gets opened up by allowing this to move forward. It doesn't end at this stage. On page 27, we're told that the flankage yard is exposed to the Gore Road and non-residential uses directly to the north. These conditions diminish the desirability of the subject lot for estate residential. So I said, well, okay, on Gore Road, how many other houses within a 2.5 acre kind of area about not only the Gore Road, but commercial property right next to it? And it's well over 100 other properties of that sort that shouldn't be conducive towards a residential development. This reasoning is flawed. My biggest concern, though, is the lack of basic consideration to the concerns that the residents have raised. 3 of my 4 kids were born on this property, went to the elementary school that you see on that drawing, and because there are no sidewalks, they walk that road. And my youngest one still goes to that school and walks that road. And as you increase traffic on Fitzpatrick, the fact that there are no sidewalks on Fitzpatrick creates a real safety concern. And the response to the safety concern, previously also and now, is this is what's been given in the proposal and what's been sent in front of you, that a municipal sidewalk is in place on the Gore Road to Fitzpatrick Drive for use by pedestrians. We understand that. We appreciate that. Thank you. But tell me what happens with regards to the increased traffic in Fitzpatrick. Who's taking responsibility of safety of my kids and others in this neighborhood when they walk on that road? And council and the planners don't think that a sidewalk would be useful. The next slide with regards to the safety concerns by the school board is what they gave in 2010, 2013. And while the planning department has decided that they've addressed those concerns, nobody's bothered to go back to the school board to say, are you comfortable with these changes? I made a query from the school board and they said, we've not looked at it again, and certainly doesn't look like that anything's been addressed from our perspective.
Sorry, excuse me, my apologies. You'd like to move more time, okay? All in favor? Carried. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize. I will try to finish this relatively fast. The important thing is that this is based on a market study, and on page 4 we're told that the commercial market study was deemed to be sufficient and no further updates are required. This is a commercial market study from 2010. In 2017, council said, give us an updated study. And in 2019, the planning department tells us, well, forget what they told you. What we were given in 2010 is sufficient. Well, this is what the neighborhood looked like in 2010. Red is where the subject property is. Yellow is other commercial zoned areas in that neighborhood. This is what it looks like today in 2019. There are 5 additional properties in less than a 2-kilometer radius that are already commercial. Is this also still needed? Certainly, wouldn't you think that a new market study would be needed to justify a commercial rezoning? We're told that there's a need for veterinary and daycare. Well, Google Maps tells me there are lots of veterinary and even more daycares nearby. Thank you for your time. I request that Council keep in regard our concerns and unanimously reject this application and not disrupt this stay-at-home community. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So members of committee, I believe Councilor Fortini, sorry, oh, there's one more delegation? Oh, Mr. Chung. Oh, okay.
Chair, there is another delegation request as well, isn't able to be added. So we'd like to add that extra delegation.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. So someone else has requested to delegate on this item?
Yeah.
So committee will need to a 2/3 vote to reopen to approve this additional delegation.
Okay, all in favor of a 2/3 to open to allow for delegation?
We need the name.
Okay, can we get the name, please?
The individual, let us know.
Okay, proceed with the delegation. If there's anyone who's interested on delegating on this item, please sign in or please make yourself known. Please, thank you. No. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
sorry,
I
Mr.
think,
Chung,
I think
go
the
ahead.
person had left.
Person is that?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Colin Chung of Glenn Schnarr and Associates, Inc. I am the planning consultant for the owner and the applicant for the proposal. Mr. Chairman, just for visual reference, if I may ask your indulgence in turning to page 7.2-17 of the staff report. It's the only visual illustration that I will actually ask for your attention. It is an aerial photo of the neighborhood showing the subject site on the Gore Road. One background, the existing 2-acre estate neighborhood that you see here is an existing neighborhood that was part of a previously planned by the City of Brampton a greenfield development called Brammy Segment Plan. So what you see on the east side of the Gore Road is the development of urban type of development in Brampton over the last, I think, 15, 20 years. In blue, highlighted, is a 2-acre estate lot on the Gore Road on the northwest corner of Fitzpatrick and the Gore Road. It is similar in size with the rest of the estate residential neighborhood to the west and to the south. One thing of observation is probably not as easy to see is it's the only estate residential lot that has its driveway on the Gore Road. Every other 2-acre lot has driveway internal to the local road, which was designed at the time. This is a fairly mature, established, historical estate residential neighborhood. It has a cross-section of a local road that doesn't have the typical urban ditches that we see in an urban subdivision today. It does not have sidewalks, as previous speakers have noted. But one thing of observation is that it's the only lot that has a driveway on the Gore Road. And it was done at the time when Gore Road was back in the 70s, probably early 80s. It was basically a 2-lane country road. Today, the Gore Road, with driveway on the Gore Road for this lot, is a planned 6-lane arterial road with transit corridor. If you look at the transition of this 2-acre estate neighborhood in relationship to this 2-acre lot and the community to the east, the transition of having an external lot that would be, assessed for commercial, it's good planning. Yes, maintaining established neighborhood is also good planning, but there's a harmony and balance that you try to achieve in planning, and it is my opinion, Mr. Chairman, that this lot is a candidate lot for consideration for rezoning. So let me speak to rezoning that's before council today. The rezoning is not about creating a retail plaza. If you see the staff report and the zoning that's being proposed by staff to be supported, is a very tight and limited commercial. What does it permit? Ultimately, if this is approved by council, it permits either a daycare or animal hospital. Only one of the two, not both. In addition to that, it permits professional offices, but not medical, not practitioner's office, but professional offices, and also personal service uses. Very limited commercial uses. And the reason for that, I know, the previous speaker spoke about the various submissions. One of the things that we had to assess as a planner was, is there an outside expert advice about the commercial needs for this neighborhood community and on this site? And those uses were identified as the key uses that would serve the community. So what we're talking about today, Mr. Chairman, is a lot that has a very atypical arrangement of an existing single detached dwelling with a driveway on the Go Road. It's external to the 2-acre lot neighborhood, on Go Road opposite an urbanized community to the east. Basically, it's to transition and serve the neighborhood and creating potentially 50 professional jobs versus having a single detached residential lot on it. So planning is one of those things, Mr. Chairman, we have different opinions. We have today 2 opinions from professional planner. We have Mr. Gagnon spoke to you about this as being not good planning. My submission to you, Mr. Chairman, this is good planning. These are the type of land use changes at locations that are underserved, underutilized, basically outdated as a single detached lot that could serve this community, the city, in a way. And I think I commend city staff because they really tightened the land use permission in the zoning bylaw in such a way that it serves the community for those uses that the community needs. It's short of those uses, and this site provides for that. This has been a long, arduous process, Mr. Chairman. This application was filed in 2010. It's been 9 years now. In 9 years, there's been very strong scrutiny by city staff. There were multiple reports required by the city. They were all submitted. They've all been reviewed and perused and assessed. Today, in the staff report, what you have before you on record is that you have the Regional Appeal supporting it. You have city departments supporting it. You have agencies supporting it. There are anything in this particular analysis that's deficient. Matter of fact, just for record, this is a supplementary report. This proposal was considered by council back in 2017. It was approved in principle. What we have before you was to deliver those, I call it prior to enactment of a zoning bylaw, pending studies and analysis that council asked staff to undertake in conjunction with the applicant. That's what's before you today. I will say that if there's a compromise, if there's a prejudice to the city, you would not see me before you providing my personal opinion as a professional planner that this is good planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. So I now believe we can bring up report 7.2, and I believe Councilor Fortini, you're on the board.
Thank you, through the chair. So, I remember this application from 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and I wanted to ask staff, this was trying to go through zoning already twice since 2010. It was never approved by council in the past until a year and a half ago when it was approved in principle. Am I correct?
Through the chair, I'm not aware of any other previous applications on this. We've been dealing with this single application, and it was received in 2010, and this has been the application we've been dealing with since that time. The recommendation report went in 2017, and the council decision was made at the time, and today's report brings the implementing bylaws and OPs forward. I'm not aware of any previous application on this.
So on this property, there was no other application besides the same daycare and thing you say? Is that what we're saying?
I'm not
Because
aware
there was
of one.
something else zoned on here. Last time I asked that, and they said they changed it. And they were trying to divide the lot, and we refused it. If we could pull up the minutes.
So through Mr. Chairman, what I can see just from our database, just from our development tracking system, there is no other application that's noted for the site.
It's just the new one. Okay. So when we were here 2 years ago, I remember we had all the residents, and we have 22 residents here. And I believe the residents from the opposite side that had signatures never even lived in the area. So we do have 22 signatures here. It is a 3M, which is an estate area. The signs were never there because I was there many times this past summer. When the road was being done, I never seen a sign there. And I did ask what happened to the signs, and they were gone. The signs have just been put up now in the last 3 weeks with new wood. They were never there. So, and the concerns with the schools were never addressed. And I went to the school and they said they actually sent emails and talked with residents, and they never got anything addressed. So I'm gonna move to not support this because I don't believe it. I believe it's supporting my residents, and I got 22 signatures, and they all live in that area. And there was only 2 residents that were supported, the one that has the application and the one across the street, so he could do the same thing for his own lot. So it's not serving the residents on the 3-acre lots, 2-acre lots, they're estate homes. There was an application just north of Mayfield, which did not get approved by our staff, they want it, but on the south side it did. So I'm not gonna support this. So I'm gonna ask for a recorded vote, and let them,
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fortini. Councillor Palucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question to staff. In the report, I thought I had seen the amount of jobs that has the potential to be on this site.
Okay, don't be nervous now.
Can you take me to that page?
Sorry, my apologies, I was speaking with Legal Services Council. Which page do you wish to go to?
I have no idea, I'm asking. I thought I saw around, and I think somebody had said around 50 jobs. Did it indicate in the report how many jobs that the potential?
Through the chair, I don't believe in, Mr. Himanshu Katyal can confirm, I don't believe we spoke to the number of jobs in here. We were speaking, we're just bringing forward the implementing documents, so we're limiting things like the gross floor area of the daycare and so forth, and there may have been some specific numbers in that regard, but I don't believe we touched on the number of employment or jobs in here.
So some of the issues that I had heard tonight, and one with respect to the super mailboxes. Typically, or does council have the ability to say to the landowner that they have to find and accommodate the mailboxes in a safe manner on their property? Or is that up to Canada Post to determine the best location?
Through Mr. Chairman. So if it is that the application was to be approved and we were then working with the landowners towards a site plan application, we would be reaching out to Canada Post to advise that we are going through that process, solicit comments from them, and work with them towards finding an appropriate solution that Canada Post accepts.
Work with Canada Post or work with the landowner?
Work with Canada Post. The landowner, through their development application, would have an ability to be part of that dialogue if it is that Canada Post was seeking to keep the post office boxes on the site in some capacity.
So, and if the landowner could accommodate them and have them in the scope of their development, which some retail plazas, small commercial plazas do have when they're on the corners of a subdivision, that's something that Canada Post would consider?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I believe so. I can't speak to the specific arrangements that would be involved, but that's my understanding.
But it's not, like, there's a precedence that been set. There's many retail plazas that have the super mailboxes accommodated within their footprint now, so it's not.
And again, through Mr. Chairman, so staff being involved in the dialogue with Canada Post, with the applicant as well, we would have an ability to comment and express whether we're in support of that occurring in a given way.
And there was a comment from Mr. Gagnon that about a masonry wall, it originally being in there as it would be in the development, and then new language that didn't really secure the masonry wall. Can you speak to that?
So the language, through the chair, the language in the proposed official plan, the wording is slightly different to deal with any potential options that, there may be a better solution than just putting a straight masonry wall up along that property line. I was trying to accommodate that and not make that as restrictive in the secondary plan document. In part, it may have been, the thinking was maybe there is a better solution that suits the neighboring owner better, and if we don't want to preclude that through a secondary plan policy. But the normal standard requirement for the city is a masonry wall between a residential property and a commercial property. And that's the reasoning there was an adjustment to that wording.
Okay, and on a kind of a go forward, if council approved the rezoning here today, what next steps would we ensure that the neighborhood would be protected with that masonry wall? What next steps would we make sure that if the residents in the area wanted the wall, we would ensure that the wall be built?
Through the chair, there would be a site plan process that would application that would have to be submitted for this property, and through that there'd be the requirements for all the features on the property would have to be identified, and if there was desired, typically that would include a masonry wall, and if that's something that was desired by the neighborhood, then that's something that we would then make as a requirement of approval of that plan.
There was a comment about safety concerns and traffic, and I too would have them with. I live on a very similar street that, not the size of the houses, I wish I did, but the runoffs, no sidewalks and no curbs. The water just goes right into the ditches. So I understand the concerns when my kids are out playing and stuff that cars coming up and down the street, any increase of traffic, there is a concern with that. I think it's safe to assume that the entrance to the plaza would be on the Fitzpatrick Street, correct? And is there another entrance where the current entrance is?
Through the chair, yes, there'd be two entrances are proposed, right in, right out access onto the Gore Road, and then left out, right in onto Fitzpatrick Drive, so restricted access point.
So we wouldn't even allow a right out of the commercial?
That's correct.
Plaza into the...
The intent was to design it in such a way as to minimize any cut-through traffic into the neighborhood.
Okay. And then just a final couple of questions. Is an application to rezone residential to commercial, is that appealable before LPAT?
Through the chair, yes, this application, any decision made here is appealable by the parties, the neighborhood.
Okay, and I don't know the last time we had an application like this refused by council go to LPAT. I don't recall that really ever happening. Does anybody else? Did we ever have an application to rezone from residential to commercial be appealed, go to the LPAT, and a decision made at at an OMB decision?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we have appeals on files all the time. Really, once the decision is made by council and it goes to LPAT, it's anybody's guess as to what the board will do. They will make a decision based on what they believe is good planning. And, the community and the city will have to abide by whatever that decision is.
Okay. If the applicant was to be refused here today, could the applicant resubmit an application next week to build 10 houses, 15 houses on this piece of property if they wanted to?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the landowners are always able to make any development application for submission through to the city for our consideration and for decision by council.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pelletier. Councillor Bowman.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Mr. Gagnon mentioned the border tree line. Is that border tree line, is that on the drawings? Do we have a survey of where the trees actually are?
Through the chair, that was not requested as part of the review of this application. That would be something we would address at the site plan review stage. So we don't have the specific details of where the various trees are at this point.
We don't know, for instance, what kind of trees they are, how old the trees are. Do we know if they're border trees or if they're on various properties where roots may be damaged, or do we know any of that?
Not the specifics of that, no.
Okay, I would think that would be pretty important to know if you're planning a development, or planning an application, but, okay, I'll leave that for now.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So actually, my questioning was along the same lines as Councillor Bowman's with regards to the trees. I would be very, devastated as much as the residents would if those trees would have to be taken down to accommodate a wall. So I'm just wondering how much space in between the tree line and the wall that would have to be in order to accommodate some kind of sound barrier.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, through the site plan approval process, if it was that the rezoning application was to be approved, staff would undertake a thorough assessment and ask for various studies as it relates to the assessment of the trees, their location, the specifics thereof, how to ensure protection of those trees as well. If it was that the concept site plan that we see here with us needed to deviate in some ways in order to better protect the trees, or if it was that there is a technical matter that through the site plan application we understood a little bit better and there was some improvement to the conceptual site plan that we would require the applicant to work with us on, that would occur.
Okay, thank you. So it's a hard one because, I really do feel for the residents. You purchase a home, you have expectations for it, and then there are changes happening around you. And that's hard to accept, especially when you live in a place that's so mature and you've invested so much time and effort on, beautifying your home. So, I really do have a hard time with accepting this, and at the same time, thank you, Councillor Pelletier, for asking the questions around LPAT, because if it does get voted down today, it goes back to LPAT. It's anyone's game, and that's also very concerning. I just feel like this fight is not going to be ending for the residents, which is unfortunate. But I would really like to. I'm really disappointed that they're here having to deal with this type of sudden change, and what they could be faced with. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Williams. Recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Fortini, and this is to so this is what you're moving, Councillor Fortini? So he's moving not to support it.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this motion is to
Yeah,
receive
and
the staff
approve.
report and refuse the applications. All in favor of the motion as moved by Councillor Fortini, please stand to be counted. Showing in favor of the motion is Councillor Dillon, Councillor Singh, Councillor Fortini, Councillor Williams, Chair Medeiros, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Paleshi, Councillor Willens, Councillor Visante, and Councillor Santos. Mr. Chair, that motion carries unanimously 10-0.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So we go now on to, okay, my apologies. And then I believe we need a motion to receive the delegations regarding item 7.2. So moved by Councillor Williams, all in favor, carried. Now we go on to item 7.1. No, we go back to item 7.1. We haven't dealt with the report yet. Are there any questions or comments? No. So can moved by Councillor Willens. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And now we go to item 7.3. I believe Councillor Fortini, you're on the board.
Through the chair, I did take it out of consent. I think we received.
I would ask you just wait a couple minutes. So people can, please. If anybody would like to exit, I would suggest you take advantage of this.
None of those people live up there, right? None.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I would ask, please, we're about to restart. So Councillor Paleshi, you were on the board? Item 7.3? Okay, Councillor Paleshi.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my iPad fell asleep. 7.3. Application to amend official plan zoning bylaw proposed. So my only question, and I know there was a correspondence, I'd like to bring that correspondence forward now, if I can. And I just ask that, with this correspondence, although I won't support deferring this application has been before members of council, and we've worked on by way of staff to finally have this here before us, and I know with respect to regional staff as well, but I understand Chair Medeiros or Councillor Bowman, that you may have, there may be an opportunity for this application to move forward and some concerns addressed by way of the correspondence from Mr. Gagnon.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Paleshi. Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. You're absolutely right. There is a motion here that will alleviate the concerns and allow the application to go through as approved by our planning staff and recommended. So what I would like to do is move the recommendations of the planning staff, get that through, and put this motion up as a separate motion to be voted on. Mr. Clerk, can we do that? So should we vote on the staff report first?
Okay, so moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Okay, carried. And now regarding the motion, can we have the therefore resolves? Oh, do we have? Nope. Okay, so I will just read it for members of committee. that the development approvals for 1403 Queen Street West will include draft plan conditions of approval for application 21T 17012B, included a shared driveway easement in favor of 1453 Queen Street West in accordance with the City of Brampton Planning Development Committee recommendation report dated June 14th, and the conditions of draft plan approved contained with Appendix 15 thereof, and that notwithstanding the shared driveway easement in favor of 1453 Queen Street West as required, a condition of approval for 1403 Queen Street West and the Queen Street West is under the jurisdiction of the Region Appeal. The City of Brampton will support continued independent driveway access to 1453 Queen Street West from the Queen Street West right-of-way, both an interim commercial use and long-term redevelopment basis for mixed-use commercial and residential development. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. We now go on to item, so 8.1, that's in consent. We go now on to item 10.1. Oh, yeah, and a motion to receive the correspondence, moved by Councillor Bowman. All in favor? Carried. So now we go on to item 10.1. Okay. Are there any questions or comments regarding items 10.1? Do you have a question, Councillor Bowman? No. Oh, no? Okay, so moved by, can I get a motion to receive the recommendation report? Moved by Councillor Palashi. All in favor? Carried. Oh, approved. Okay, thank you. We now go on to no deferred matters. Public question period. Other members of the public want to come forth and ask a question? Going once, twice, 3 times. Okay, no closed session. Our next meeting is September 9th, 7 p.m. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Dillon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Have a good night.